And for those of you that were not here last week, we went through 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. In chapter 2, we saw the response that Paul was making because Timothy, he had sent Timothy back to the Thessalonians, and Timothy gave a report of how things were going in Thessalonica. Paul was reminding them of the legitimacy of his ministry because behind him came people that were trying to tear down everything that he had done. Good evening. So behind him came people that were trying to tear down what he had done. So like we've seen in many of the other books that Paul wrote, he's reminding them of the legitimacy of his ministry. He said it wasn't in error, but the message was doctrinally sound that he brought. He said that there were no impure motives. He wasn't doing this for self-gratification or for any other reason except for just to bring the gospel. There was no deception, and that word deception is to try to catch a fish without bait. That's what that word actually means. So there was no deception in his words. He wasn't trying to please man. He was only trying to please God. There was no flattery. He didn't come and try to make them feel good about themselves, but he was coming to preach the gospel. He didn't do it in greed. He wasn't asking for money. He was working his way through on his own. It was a tough it was just it was about. First Thessalonians can kind of be broken down. There's multiple ways. If you any commentator and any pastor will break it down into different groups because you could say, oh, this section is about this and this section is about this and so on. And there's a lot of them that are really good. I think that they've put them in great categories. My favorite one is a little bit more catchy. It says the first part is trials will come. The next part is tribulations will come. But the last part is Jesus will come. So there's kind of three sections in 1 Thessalonians. Trials will come, tribulations will come, and Jesus will come. So all of them are equally true, as we've started to discover last week and will continue to discover this week. We talked about how Paul came in boldness, and for those of you that weren't here, we really went into a lot of detail about Paul and how he had just been beaten with sticks, and I don't mean like a little stick, I mean like a big, developing branch kind of thing. And actually the Romans would kill people with this kind of torture. Paul didn't die, but he was just beaten with sticks to Thessalonica. So we always think of Paul, or maybe it's just me, but I think of this lovely missionary guy, and he's like, I'm going to travel to all these little towns and say hi to the people, and then witness, and then I'm going to go on to the next one. And sometimes I think we forget about the enormous pressure that he was under, the amount of pain and the physical pain and agony that he was under. And when he got to Thessalonica, he was no doubt still, and probably still had wounds from this beating that just happened a few weeks before, or a few days before, I'm sorry. And despite the fact that he had been beat, he came with boldness to the Thessalonians. He didn't come and say, I think I'm going to be a little bit more mild this time because I'm afraid the Jews might get upset, so I think I'm going to turn the gospel a little bit, will be a little softer. He didn't do that. He just came in with boldly gospel that he had preached before, the same gospel that had gotten him thrown in jail, the same gospel that had gotten him beat, the same gospel that had him whipped. He had even been stoned for this, and now he's going to preach it again. And lo and behold, we have kind of a repeat performance where the Jews are getting angry, and they start a mob, and he has to leave in the middle of the night from Thessalonica, and he ends up in Berea. And I know I'll mention this later, but Berea's about right, and those same people that were mad at him in Thessalonica followed him, or heard that he was in Berea, followed over there to cause more trouble with him there. So, they were just, he was definitely in their scope, and they were not giving up on trying to silence Paul. So, we talked about how now the Thessalonians themselves, the new believers, they're starting to endure persecution. So again, persecution will come, or trials will come. So they're starting starting to go through persecution. And then there is this wonderful reminder of the final part that we're going to talk about, which is Jesus will come. So we started in chapter 1, and we said that at the end of each chapter there is one or two verses that go through the second coming of Christ to encourage the Thessalonians, but also to encourage us today. Jesus is really coming back. It's not just something that we say because it's in the book and we're supposed to say it, but it's true. Jesus is really coming back. So he started in the first part of Thessalonians, and he said that his return is promised and he's going to rescue us. So if they were to wait, which means to actively wait with rising intensity and clarity about what is hoped for. And that rising intensity and clarity we should be building on every week as we're reading more and more of 1 Thessalonians. We should be having more clarity that Jesus is coming, and what does that mean? And it should get us more excited. And so then last week we learned not only is he coming back, but we're really going to know each other. We learned in chapter 2 that we will see each other and we will know each other in the presence of the Lord. And I had actually been watching our live stream that was not streaming very well, but they had come out to this because this was something they had struggled with, and they had reached out to just say thank you for preaching on this, because I always wondered if I would know people, because I was afraid that the best is here when it came to relationships. I mean, obviously we want our relationship with God, but what about all the people that meant so much to me? We'll know them when we get to heaven. I know my mom. She's going to be there. And I will introduce you if you don't know her, because she was a pretty wonderful person. But I will introduce my mom. She's for sure going to be there. My grandmother will be there. I have much family that will be there. But let's read 1 Thessalonians 2, 19 through 21 one more time. This is the end of chapter 2. And where Paul is saying, for who is our hope or our joy or crown of exaltation? Is it not even you in the presence of our Lord Jesus and his coming? For ye are joy. So what he's saying is when Jesus returns and together we are in his presence and I see you there, that will be my glory and joy. And I see you there when Jesus returns and we're in his presence and I see you, it will be all worthwhile. All of these meetings that he had, all of these different trials and tribulations that he had, when he sees them in heaven, everything was worthwhile. That is his joy. That is really his trophy. Just a few verses back, Paul was talking about how much he wanted to see them, but if I don't, when I see you in heaven. So it's just an encouragement to us that we will know each other and see each other in heaven. So, like I said, that might seem like a duh moment to you. Like you may have already had this figured out in your head that, of course, we'll see each other. But I think, especially when you're going through grief, especially if you've lost someone, Satan uses this doubt that somehow God is not going to let you see somebody that's so important to you, or he's going to hold back something that was a promise before. But think about what we do know about heaven. I mean, some of the things we know about heaven, aren't they a little ridiculously over the top? Like streets of gates of pearl? And God always goes over and above whatever it is that we need. So certainly relationships will be over and above whatever we have here. I just can't explain the intensity of how wonderful heaven is really going to be. So, since our joy is Jesus, we won't have need for anything else, right? Even if we don't really, even if all we had in heaven was just Jesus, that would be enough. But God never gives us just enough. He gives us full to overflowing, far more than what we need or asked for or thought of. So God really gives us. So together, the Bible says, together we will meet the Lord and we will know our fellow followers of Christ there. So would God prepare for us that was any less amazing than this place? was to me, and I know like some people watching it was very important to them too. And I want to just continue to encourage. God is preparing a place for us. It's taken him a long time. It must be a pretty good place. But he's preparing a place for us so that we can be with us should change how we live every day. How we live every day. If we really believe that there's a heaven to gain, there's a place that we need to go, it should change how we live today. Because this is not really our home. We're just my favorite. My husband will quote to you bands from the 80s. I like bands from the 60s and 70s. So I'm way out there compared to him. There's one of the black people was there in Urban, and he said that this is not my home. I'm just passing through. We're just passing through. This isn't our home. We're just on a trip. We're just going through. So this week we're going to jump in and we're going to start reading 1 Thessalonians 3, 1 through 5. So